Hey guys. All right, so I wanted to just give you a quick overview of RFA bidding. There's a lot of information about this on the forum, but it's lengthy and it's kind of hard to get your head around if it's your first time going through it. So I think it's just easier to just do a quick video. I'm going to try to make this as quick as possible, just to give you an understanding of how the process works, what you can expect, all of that, because this is really going to be your first big action within Capwise. Okay, so first of all, the basics. An RFA, a restricted free agent, is any player whose contract that they're currently on ends in restricted free agency. Now, for our purposes, we don't really care whether they've re-signed or not re-signed yet. It doesn't matter. Either way, they're going to be treated like an RFA in our league. This is one of the most unique and fundamental things about Capwise. And the basic logic here is that we wanted to ensure that every single player is available to every single team at least once in his career. And so a good example of this, and the reason this actually came about, I'm a Penguins fan. I started really getting into fantasy hockey right around the time that Sidney Crosby was starting out. And I was playing in a league with other Penguins fans, and it was a keeper league. And all I wanted to do was own Sidney Crosby on my team just once. And I never got the chance because the guy who had the first overall pick in 2005 or six, whatever it was, he took Crosby, obviously, as anybody would. And Crosby never became available again. He's been signed and re-signed throughout his entire career. Um, and it's not just elite players like Crosby. And another one that came to mind recently was Brad Marchand. He actually never came up to free agency ever throughout his whole career in Boston. And so, again, we're just wanting to make sure that everybody has a chance at least one time. So there's obviously whoever gets to draft the player, that's great. But then everyone gets one more chance, one time, usually, 3 years after his initial contract or whenever he becomes a restricted free agent. Everybody has a shot at him. So that's the concept. That's why we do this. And again, this applies to anybody whose contract ends in restricted free agency, unless they're JV eligible. If they're still JV eligible, they are protected. They're hidden down on JV. Even if they're on your varsity roster, they're still protected. So it's only for guys who've played enough games in the NHL, which is 121 games, to have lost JV eligibility. That's who's eligible for RFA bidding. Now, if you have a JV eligible guy, who would not typically be available for RFA bidding, but you want to see if maybe you could get an offer for him because you're not actually that interested in him, that's totally cool. You just have to let me know, and I can put him into the pool for your league for bidding. So here's how it works. We have a group of restricted free agents. It's 50 to 100 guys usually. They are ranked based on their Fantrax score. So Fantrax in every league in Fantrax, they give you a score, which is just a rating for the player based on the stat categories of your league. It's not perfect. It's definitely a little bit skewed. It feels like, for example, like it seems a little heavy on penalty minutes or things like that, like odd categories like that. But generally speaking, it's a rating based on our rule book or our stat categories. So we rank the players based on their ranking, and based on the score that they get from Capwise, they are assigned a star rating in our process. So just to put that on the screen here, here's how the star rating works. Any player who's 85 plus on Fantrax gets 5 stars. 60 to 85 is 4 stars. 50 to 60, 3 stars, right? It goes down the list. Now, most years will have maybe one 5 star player. It's a very rare thing to have a 5 star player. They're typically goalies. Um, just most often the players that are at that high top tier of Fantrax rating are older players, players in their prime who are not going to become RFAs. So anyway, everybody's assigned a star rating. That's how we start. And then what we do is we divvy up that list into 3 rounds, kind of randomly. And we try to make all 3 rounds roughly equal. You've got a handful of forwards, a handful of defensemen, a couple of goalies. You got some 5 star, 4 star, 3 star, 2 star, 1 star players in every group. So you basically got 3 kind of equal rounds of bidding within the process. This gives you 3 chances to acquire players, right? So if you're out there and you're an active bidder in the RFA bidding process, you might take a big shot at somebody in round 1 and not get them. You have another chance now in round 2 to bid on somebody else. You can't bid on the same guy again, but you can bid on somebody else in round 2. And maybe now you're a little bit more desperate, so you're going to bid a little bit higher, a little bit more recklessly. And then again, in round three, you've got another chance. The players have already been assigned to their rounds. I mean, here we are on May 9th, so about a month out. I usually try to get these players into the rounds that they're going to go into, and I also um, have laid out the star ratings for everybody. So RFA bidding itself, how it actually works is you pick the player that you want to bid on, and you offer a dollar amount to bid. The maximum is 8 million, the minimum is 500,000. So it's a really big range. And you could bid anywhere in that. Based on how much you bid. Oh, and I should say, by the way, there is a minimum bid as well. I say 500,000, that's for one-star players. The better the player, the higher that floor, because we don't want you bidding $500,000 for a five-star player. That's just that we call it troll bidding. It's just not fair. It's waste of effort. So here's the minimum bids here. Um, so a five-star player, the minimum is 6.501. So already you're in the top tier of bidding for the top tier of player. And then it goes down from there. Now, based on how much you've bid, you're going to owe a certain number of compensation points. Okay, so if you bid in this lowest bracket, you're going to owe 7 points of compensation, all the way up to the top bracket where you're going to owe 140 points of compensation. Now, what does that actually mean? You have to provide assets to the person you are poaching that player from. So in addition to paying this bid, which is going to hit your cap, and I'll explain that in a minute, you are also having to transfer some assets to that other team as compensation. Each of those assets, which are going to be draft picks or cash, each of those assets is worth a certain number of points. And the total points has to add up to whatever you see displayed here. I'm going to go now to the RFA bidding tool. This really helps us understand the process, and it has a lot of good information. So just jumping over to that tool, you can see there's a tab here called compensation. If I click on that, I can see the points that are required for each of those brackets. That's the same as I was just showing you on the forum. But then here you see amateur picks, re-entry picks, and cash, and you can see, for first overall, it's worth 50 points. All the way down, you can use any of your first 3-round picks on amateur and any of your first 2 rounds in re-entry. So you can see every single individual pick is going to be worth a different number of points. And then you can also use next year's picks, and you can also use picks into the future. So we, at this point, I think it's 3 years worth of picks, or is it 4 years? Whatever's available on the spreadsheet here. If I just look at a team's spreadsheet, so you can offer picks from 25, 26, 27, or 28. Yeah, sorry, I had to think about that. Yes, 25, 26, 27, or 28. Is that right? Yes. So you can offer picks from any of the current year or the next 3 years after that. That's what you can offer as compensation. And then as we showed on the compensation tab here, that's how much they're worth. Okay. Now cash is the way to kind of piece together those final points of compensation. So you might pick the picks that you have, this one, and this one, and that adds up to like 91, but you're trying to hit 93. You're just going to tack on a little bit of cash, 500K, let's say, to add 2 more points to your compensation. Cash is going to be transferred over to the other team. So it's going to hit your cap for the upcoming year. It's also going to be a benefit or a gain on their cap for the upcoming year. So it's the same as trading cap space, which is something that we have in this league. But you can do that through compensation as well. So when I look at the bidding tool here, this is the easiest way, I think, to understand how the process really works. First thing you're going to do is pick your league. The next thing you'll do is pick your team, which will come from this dropdown. You're going to pick the round that you're bidding in. So 1, 2, or 3, there's 3 rounds of bidding. And then you're going to pick the player that you want to bid on. So these are all the players available in round 1. Now, if I pick trying to think, yeah, he's the only 5-star player. This should be filled in. I'm not sure why it's not. Oh, no, of course not. Sorry. So the last thing you have to do, and you've noticed all the fields that I've touched are blue. Those are only the blue cells are the ones that you should actually be manipulating on this form. So now I have to make a bid. Now my bid has to be at least the minimum bid. It can be up to 8 million. So let's say I want to just throw a max bid on him. That's an $8 million bid. Now it tells me I need 140 points. I have to now begin adding compensation to get up to that 140 point mark. It's going to be a lot of compensation for a maximum bid. It should be. Now you see here, there's a note. It says at least one asset must, by itself, be worth 30% of the total compensation. So if I owe 140 points, one asset needs to be worth at least 30% of that total, which means that I need to have an asset on here that's worth, if I'm doing the math quickly in my head, I need to add a 42 point asset to this bid. If I don't have a 42 point, so let's see what I would need for a 42 point asset. I could use anything in the top 8 of this year's amateur. I could use a first rounder next year, or anything in the top 4 of the reentry. Now, there's a decent chance you don't have any of those available to you. And if you don't, you simply can't place a maximum bid or any bid in that top bracket, which is this 6.501 to 140, which actually means that you quite literally cannot bid on a 5-star player because a 5-star player has to be in this top range. So this is just something to keep in mind as you move forward in the league. You may want to protect an asset that's worth at least 42 points. So that first year amateur pick next year is very valuable in that sense because there's no guarantee you're going to be in a top 8 pick or a top 4 pick in either of the other 2 drafts. So if you want to be able to place a maximum bid or bid on a 5-star player, you have to protect that first round amateur next year. Back to the bidding tool here. So now I need to start adding compensation to get up to that total. By the way, there's also a little note here. You have not offered enough compensation. These notes are really just intended to help you. This is red right now, which means I can't submit the bid yet. It doesn't have everything I need. And this is explaining what I'm missing. So let's start adding things. Let's say that I do have first overall. So I'm going to offer that up. That's 50 points. So that covers off my requirement, the 30% requirement. So you saw that note disappeared, but I still haven't offered enough compensation. Over here, we can track our current points. I've currently offered 50 out of the 140 I need, so I have 90 points to go. So now I'm going to pick another pick. Let's say I've got, I certainly would have the 15th overall as well, in theory. That's another 33 points on there. If I had the first overall pick, I probably have it on the reentry side as well, so I'm going to add that. So now I've offered first overall amateur, first overall reentry, my second round amateur, which is the 15th overall, and I'm now 9 points short. So for 9 points, let's see, let's jump to the compensation tab. For 9 points, maybe I can offer a third round amateur next year. So let's say that's 7 points. Now I need 2 more. So I'll just tack on the $500,000 here, which is worth 2 points. And you can see now the note disappeared and this has turned green because I now have a legal bid. From here, I could click submit and that's going to process the bid. So this really has allowed me, like using this tool has really allowed me to understand what it actually means to place a bid, the compensation concept actually means. So let's talk about what logistically happens now after this bid is submitted. The bid is going to go to the protecting, we call it the protecting GM, and he's going to have 3 options. The first option, he can just match the bid outright. So to match the bid, he's going to have to pay a signing bonus that's equal to what you've offered. That's $8 million. Again, I'm going to explain the signing bonuses a little bit more in a second. To match the bid, he has to pay that. If the GM matches the bid, there's no cost to you as the bidder. You don't have to pay the signing bonus you offer. You don't have to give up any of the compensation. Obviously, you don't get the player, but there's no cost. So there's no risk really in putting a bid out there because if you don't get the player you're bidding for, you don't lose anything. The second option that the GM has is to accept the bid and release the player to you. Now, if that happens, technically, the player does not change hands until we switch over to the new season, which is on July 1st. So you know that you have this player, but you don't have to find space for him on your roster until we move over to June 1st, or to July 1st, rather. And at that point, you've probably lost a bunch of players off your roster, other free agents and everything else. And so you'll have a little bit more flexibility to add this player. We also, at that point, when we get into that point in the summer, you're allowed to exceed the salary cap by up to 10%. So if the salary cap is 107 million, you can go up as high as 117.7 million, which is a 10% overage on that salary cap. So again, that gives you a little bit more flexibility to take on this RFA's big contracts, plus the signing bonus you've just paid while you get things sorted out going into next year. The third option that the protecting GM has is to negotiate with you. Now, this is something that was introduced just a couple of years ago, and the reason for it was that a lot of times the GMs aren't interested in these big packages of picks. They actually want a player or a prospect that is reasonably equal in value to the picks. So if a GM chooses to negotiate, the signing bonus is not going to change. So what they're going to do is come back to you and say, hey, I'm not totally interested in your compensation package, but instead of that second round amateur, would you be willing to include, whatever prospect from your JV roster? And you would have the opportunity to negotiate back and forth. You have, I think it's like a 2-day, 3-day window to negotiate back and forth. Once you've come to terms on a compensation package, we then present that to the executive committee, just like we do any other trade. And the way that works is we'll give them the bid amount. We'll tell them meaning the executive committee. We'll give them the bid amount, and we'll tell them the points that would be required, 140 points. Any picks and cash that have remained in your package that you settled on, we'll add up those points, and then the remaining points is what we say is the perceived value of the player that you're presenting. So in other words, let's say that you do replace this 15th overall with, I don't know, random Caden Price. Ultimately, what that's going to mean is that the implied value of Caden Price is 33 points. And that's what's going to be presented back to the executive committee to review. And the executive committee is going to say, yeah, Caden Price, he's about 33. Obviously, it's a little bit subjective, but he's about 33 points. He's about the same as a 15th overall amateur pick. This looks okay to us. Or they're going to be like, what? Like Caden Price is 33 points. Like, no way. Caden Price is worth like 3 points. This is a crazy offer. And they will actually reject it. And then you'll have a chance to renegotiate. And then if you just can't come to terms at the end of the negotiation window, which again is 2 or 3 days, if you haven't come to terms by the end of it on a deal that can be approved by the executive committee, now the GM has to either match or release based on the original bid. So those are the 3 options that the protecting GM has. And he's got a day to consider, about maybe even a day and a half to consider what to do. You're going to be notified as soon as possible once he makes his decision, whether it's going to match, release, negotiate. Okay, so the way that this works, again, we have 3 rounds. The first round begins this year on May 31st. It always starts on a Saturday. And you have Saturday, Sunday, Monday to place your bids. So you have 3 full days to place bids. Then, and let me just pull this up so I get it right. Then Tuesday morning, I come in and by noon on Tuesday, that's noon my time, noon Pacific, by noon on Tuesday, I've sent those bids to the GMs. The GMs review the bids, they decide what they want to do, release, match, negotiate. And they let me know by the end of the day on the 4th. So now the 4th, now we're on to Wednesday. So they've made their decision by Wednesday. And then you've got Wednesday through Friday to negotiate. And then on Saturday, we start with round 2. Okay, so it takes 3 full weeks to get through this process. The whole thing will be done by Friday, June 20th. Now, in terms of what actually happens on your roster, so once you've, again, none of these assets change hands until July 1st. So the bidding happens and we're all like, okay, noted, this is what will happen on July 1st, but nothing actually changes hands until we get to that point. Once it does, it more or less functions like a trade. Any draft pick you've given up will just disappear, given as compensation to Baron Hammock, right? So this was a RFA compensation, this first round amateur draft pick. Any cash that's exchanged does not fall under cap space trades because it doesn't count against your limits on that. You're only allowed to acquire 7 million in cap space via trade. It'll show up like this, received as compensation. So this was a $1 million compensation from RFA Bidding. So that shows up here. It's a credit for 1 year only to this team's salary cap, but it doesn't count against their cap space trade. The final thing here is the signing bonuses. So this is the bid you're actually placing. It's treated as a signing bonus. You are allowed to space that signing bonus over 1, 2, or 3 years. It's divided evenly between those years. And if it can't be divided totally evenly, we put the extra at the in the first year. So you can see here like 1.501 and then 1.5. If you drop the player, buy out the player, or trade the player, it does not matter. You still have to pay that bonus. Even if the player gets bought out, the player gets, defects to Russia, like whatever. If the player is just gone, the career-ending injury, whatever, you still have to pay that bonus. There's no way around that bonus. You can change your payoff plan anytime up to the point that the season starts. Once the season starts, that is locked in, and you can't change it again. You can't pay it off early. You can't do anything like that. But you have until the beginning of the season to decide. That gives you the flexibility as you're going through the drafts and you're building out your roster, gives you the flexibility to modify that as needed. The picks, as I mentioned, just change hands. The cap traded shows up in here, and of course, then the players switch. Now, one thing worth noting: let's say, so here I'm Baron Hammock, Black Harbor Octopi. He does have Jake Ottinger. Let's say he gets that maximum bid for Jake, and he decides not to keep him. I mean, look, he's already getting paid 8.25 million for 8 years or whatever that is. On top of that, you're gonna have to pay, that $8 million signing bonus divided by 3, but you're still looking at 2.5 or whatever million per year. You're talking about paying almost $11 million for Jake Ottinger. You would think long and hard about whether you want to do that. Let's say he decides to release it. He loves the compensation package, so he decides to release Jake to the bidding team. As I mentioned, the players do not change hands until July 1st. However, Octopi, knowing that he's going to be letting go of Ottinger anyway, he can actually buy him out right now. So from the time that bidding ends on June 20th till July 1st, he can buy out Ottinger. He can save himself this $4 million and then use that cap savings to do additional buyouts or trades or whatever else he might want to do. So there's that kind of lame duck period if you've released a player where you can then buy him out and save yourself some cap space. The reason for that, that's a very intentional thing. The reason for that is to actually incentivize you to release players. This is an added bonus, right? Not only are you going to get that compensation package, and not only are you going to not have to worry about paying $11 million for Jake Ottinger, but you're also going to get a little bit of cap flexibility this year too, because you could buy him out. And then you can leverage that for other purposes in that lame duck window. We're seeing in real time the spreadsheet database updating. Just want to go back to this and make sure there's some details here about the negotiation window, how that all works. So it's worth reading through that. A couple more things, right? So this bidding tool, this is a sample of the tool. You can totally take a look at this. There's a link to it from that post on the forum, but you are actually going to get your own version of this tool. RFA bidding is a silent auction, right? It's meant to be blind bidding. You don't know what the other guys are bidding. And so we don't want this to be a public thing. So you are going to get your own version of this. And the way that we distribute that is we have these Capwise GM folders. Everybody has one. It's shared with you. And before RFA bidding, right before RFA bidding, I will deposit your version of this tool directly into your folder. So you'll go into your folder, you'll work with the tool from there. And what actually happens when you click submit bid, it actually puts a PDF of that bid directly into your folder as well. So you'll have your own bidding tool, and then you'll also have a record of all the bids that you've placed will be dropped into your folder as well. I want to point out that if this is my offer here, I'm offering 1st and 15th and all of this. I can't place another bid in this same round. Like, let's say I also want to bid on Bowen Byram. I can't use any of these assets in that other bid for Bowen Byram. I can only use per round. I can only use each asset one time. This is what happens is what used to happen. We used to allow that. And what would happen is 2 bids would be accepted, but you couldn't give your first overall to 2 different teams. And so that you would then have to pick which one you're going to give it to. And then you go back to the other team and say, I'm rescinding my offer or whatever. It was a mess. So the point is you can not use those assets more than one time per round. Now, if this bid for Ottinger is matched, you know you're retaining those assets. In round two, you can go use those same assets to make a bid for somebody else. The concept of overbidding, which is explained here at the bottom of this forum post. If, and the max bid is a bad example, so let me pick somebody else. I'm talking about Lafreniere here. The minimum bid here is 3.001. So let's say I bid 3.5 million. I owe 86 points for that. So just looking at where that falls, 3.5 million right here. I owe 86 points. As I'm putting together my compensation package, it's hard to hit 86 exactly right. You get some flexibility here. You must hit at least 86, but you can offer all the way up to 92. And the reason it's 92 is because if you offer 93, you're now into the next bracket and you need to actually increase your bid to land here. So you can offer anywhere from 86 to 92. Now, obviously, you get up to 92, you're probably offering a little bit of a sweeter package than the guy who's just offering 86. And so that gives you a way to sort of like, again, sweeten the deal, punch up the offer a little bit. On the maximum bid, the minimum compensation is 140 points. There is no maximum compensation offer. So you can't go past 8 million on the bid, but you can offer 200 points of compensation if you've got it. And you want to just really make it like a knockout offer that the GM really has to think about. So that's overbidding. That is, like I said, that's explained here, hopefully in a way that's kind of understandable. Here we talk about what happens if you receive a bid. If you receive multiple bids for the same player, that happens a lot. Like a player like Ottinger, who is, head and shoulders above every other player we have available this year. You might get 3 or 4 bids for him. You get the opportunity to review all of them. Now they might be all over the board. You might have a bid for 8 million. You might have a bid for Andre's bad example again. Let me pick somebody who's not in the maximum range. Let's stick with Lafreniere. You might get a bid of 3.5 million. You might get a bid of 6 million. You might get a bid of 8 million. So you've got all these different bids. If you're going to match, you have to match the highest offer. So if you got 3.5, 6, and 8, to match, it's going to cost you $8 million. However, if you want to release him or negotiate any of those offers, you can pick any of those guys. You're not limited to just the one who gave you the highest offer, because it might be that highest offer was a whole bunch of like mid-round, like second round draft picks. Whereas the guy offering 3.5 million offered you first overall, nothing else, just first overall. But that's a great offer, So you may be more inclined to negotiate with a lower bid, and that's totally cool. So you'll get all 4 of those bids. It'll be 4 PDFs or whatever attached, and you'll be able to review them all. And then you can match, negotiate, release, whichever. If you don't respond, you're a protecting GM. You get these offers. You have a day and a half to respond. If you don't respond to me, it's going to be an automatic match. Please respond. I mean, it's helpful to respond. People are very eager to hear your response. And sometimes everybody's kind of waiting to see. Like if you've got, let's say let's say you've received a bid, but you've also placed a bid. Your bid has been accepted, or maybe it's pending. You might be waiting to decide what to do on the player you're protecting based on what happens with the one that you've put out there. And so everybody's kind of looking and trying to, wait for the responses to come in. So the point is respond early so that I can get those responses posted and those dominoes can start to fall and people can start to make educated decisions about what to do. Then here we have what we're calling the magic bidding tool, which is what you just saw here. This is it. So this is a link just to view that kind of template tester demo one. And then there's another video here really explaining, again, how to click these buttons. It's an old video. It actually is this is the first thing we ever did on Google Sheets. So it is, there's a lot about Google Sheets in that video. Otherwise, I think I've pretty much hit everything here. Scrolling down this list, here are the players and their star values. We have a lot of 4 stars this year. This is unusual. Usually it's mostly 3. So it's a decent year for bidding. The historical data is here as well. I think this is kind of interesting to look at. Now, I would encourage you to only look at 2018 and on. We have evolved the way this works over the years, and 2018 is where we kind of locked in on what is now our current process. You can see the number of players with bids is pretty low, hovering somewhere, especially the last 3 years, somewhere around 12%. So of all the RFAs available, only 12% of those guys are actually getting a bid. So more often than not, you're not going to receive a bid at all for a player. And by the way, if you don't receive a bid, you can keep that player for free. There's no signing bonus. You keep him into next year if you want. Um, the rate of exchange is pretty low, 3%. So this is comparing total number of players available to the number of players that are exchanged. So this looks at all 12 or 13 of our leagues. So it hovers around 3%. That's down a bit from where it used to be. We'd like to get it back up to that 4%, but we've been tweaking the negotiation package, the compensation packages and that sort of thing, which has affected that. Negotiation was introduced last year, and we did see a slight rise in exchange based on that negotiation. And then rate of acceptance is really looking at, so again, this is comparing to all players available, but only 12% of those players got a bid. So 3% of all the players available exchange hands, but almost 25% of the players that received bids change hands. So about 25% of bids are accepted. So that's a pretty high rate of acceptance. That just gives you an understanding of kind of what to expect. If you got a bunch of RFAs on your team, you can expect about 12% of them to receive a bid. So all that's there. The only thing that's not here yet is who's in which round. But you are able to figure that out using this demo tool. I should publish that out somewhere when I can. Now, the place to go and look to see who are the RFAs available in your league is the RFAs tab on your league spreadsheet. Some guys are owned in one league, but not owned in the other. So it's really specific to each league, but you can see it there. I need to pull in the star rating, I think, for these guys, but here you can just at least see who's available, and you can see whether they've signed and how much they've signed for, if they've signed. Now, again, regardless of whether they've signed or not, they're still going to be available, but this can kind of guide you to be like, this guy signed for 8.5 million. I'm not touching him. Or even the unsigned guys, it's a bit of a risk. Now, if an unsigned player ends up, let's say you bid on an unsigned player and you're happy, you get him and you're excited, you got this player. All of a sudden he signs a $12 million contract and you have buyer's remorse. You don't have to keep him. You can let him, you could not accept that new contract, but you don't get your compensation back. And you still have to pay that signing bonus. So you're still going to be paying something for the guy and you're going to have given up a bunch of assets. But just something to be aware of with these guys who are unsigned. All right, I think that basically covers it. As I mentioned, it is complicated. You can read through this post, this whole thread really, a few times to kind of get the hang of it. And I'd suggest kind of clicking some buttons around this thing. I'm just going to click reset to, I just got to go through this. You'll have to do that the first time as well. That's denied. That's odd. Okay. Anyway, I'll clear this out, but this is available for you to start playing with a little bit. We'll get those your personal one deposited into your folder in the next couple of weeks, and then bidding starts on May 31st, which is about 3 weeks from tomorrow, exactly 3 weeks from tomorrow. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask, and good luck. Enjoy it.